Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals. I'm your host, Eric Morgan, a former soccer writer for We Don't Do That Anymore.
You really went back to the well.
We have moved beyond listing our credentials. Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals. I'm your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. I don't think I actually told you this yet, Eric. I met a fan.
You met a fan?
I met a living, breathing fan of the show. Yeah.
I just thought they were bots.
No, a listener to the show, Kimberly, reached out on Instagram after we did our Corbin Albert episode and thanked us from one bisexual to another for what we talked about. And turns out she lives in LA and she was at the Angel City game over the weekend, so we met up for a drink afterward. Shout out to Kim, who is a lovely, delightful human being and gave us a couple of good ideas for future episodes. So thank you, Kim. It was great to meet you. Kim's the kind of fan that I like this show having.
As opposed to other fans that we disapprove of?
Hate listeners. We have a couple of hate listeners out there.
Yeah, no, and honestly, I kind of appreciate them too. Actually, I appreciate all listeners. Now is actually a good time to mention, if you're enjoying this podcast, we continue to plan on delivering it to you, but we would love it if you would like and subscribe and give us a review on whatever platform you find us on.
Indeed. Rate us 5 stars if you're going to rate us at all.
Mm-hmm.
And follow us on all social channels at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X Own Goals. And if you want to get in touch and think we've made an own goal, you can always email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. And we want to make this tent as big as possible because we got some fun stuff planned for the Olympics in a couple of weeks.
If you're in Los Angeles and attending an Angel City game, there's a good chance that you will meet at least one of us at that game. So send us a DM.
Indeed, the Sunset Lounge on the roof of the stadium after the game. We always pop through, have a drink or two. So come say hi.
Yeah, and if you're not in Los Angeles is a lovely place to visit, but don't do any of the tourist things. I was going to make a joke off the 5 stars, but now I think that has passed. So why don't we just rip into the tastiest fixture on the entire season slate?
This game between the Kansas City Current and the Orlando Pride at CPKC Stadium in Kansas City on Saturday, which finished 2-1 in favor of Orlando. I was definitely thinking this before Carrie Lawrence got sent off before halftime.
Mm-hmm.
But even after that, I've been pondering for the last 48 hours. Was this the best played game of the season?
I don't think.
Not necessarily the most entertaining, not necessarily the game with the most chances or the most high scoring, or however you might want to answer that question. Mm-hmm. Was it the best played game of the season?
And again, I don't think so, but that is often the case when the two best teams end up meeting each other. Do I think that this was the best played game of the season? I do not. Do I think these are the two best teams in the league? I have left this game thinking that just as I thought it going in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited to break this one down because I think there are lots of really good things to talk about that are born out of two really good teams playing each other. So, Evan, where do you want to start? Because I got a list.
You got it. Well, I guess what I want to say up top is that I think there actually is an argument to be made for it being the best played game of the season because, as you alluded to, so often when the top two sides face each other, or when the two best teams in a cup final come up against each other, it can be very attritional. It can be very cagey. Can often be very physical, which this game was, and isn't necessarily representative of a lot of quality. However, I think this really is true of the first 42 minutes. I think this game was played at a very high level of quality where there were lots of very good chances, but there weren't so many good chances that it felt like the game was just so open and no one was playing defense. I thought that the game demonstrated a lot of very intelligent defensive strategies on both sides that prevented that game from being really, really open. I think that the game had a ton of excitement. I think just for entertainment value, the ways in which it expressed its physicality very clearly was a great watch. And I also think that there is playing with 10 players and then there's playing with the 10 players. If you catch my meaning.
Yes.
There are times when you're just packing 9 behind the ball and hoping for a draw because you're on the road. Other times you pick your spots and you can still create really good looking chances and have what you might call like the Simeone effect, where stodgy, deep, compact defenses are actually quite beautiful and entertaining. And I think that's something that Orlando was able to pull off in the second half of this game. So I don't know necessarily if it was the best played game, but I definitely think there's an argument to be made for it.
I am going to probably present some reasons I don't think it was the best played game. But that said, it was, for me at least, a really riveting game to watch, even if there are aspects of the play that I think both teams can go back and have reservations about or have serious question marks about. Less so for Orlando, because I think how they played down a player was extraordinary and sort of like
much so.
A good way to, like, a thing that coaches should study for what to do, and also an unrepeatable thing if you don't have a Barbra Banda. So a good thing that coaches should study. Asterisks.
Yeah.
But I thought that there were, I'm going to say something, and maybe this is a good place for us to start, or maybe I'm just going to throw it out there and you can let this sit in your brain while we discuss it sort of minute by minute. But did we see the return of U.S. women's national team's Vlatko Andonovski in a big game?
No, I don't think we
I'm
did.
not so sure. And we'll discuss this as we go through, because I felt Kansas City really left Chawinga on an island, and Debinha sort of struggled up top, and that there wasn't a lot of space for them to play in, and then when up, weren't proactive enough at sort of trying to win this game until the very end. But let's let that sit. Let's discuss how this game opened.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the first, let's just say everything building up to the first goal?
So those first 37 minutes I thought were very much a process of probing and exploring.
Agreed.
And trying to figure out where space was, because I think both of these teams are hyper aware of how aggressive they both want to be, but knowing that that's, that they're not playing Utah or Houston, and so that space is going to be limited and tentative. I thought that Orlando really made a statement in that first half hour, where on the, on which side of the press and drop coin were they going to defend with, they chose the side that I didn't think they'd go with, and that was to press the hell out of Kansas City.
Intermittently, but yes.
Well, intermittently, but also very aggressively and very prominently, to the point where Kansas City actually looked a little rattled at times. I didn't think that it was super easy for them, as you say, to get the ball to Temwa, Chawinga, and Debinha, as it often can be for them. It happened, no question, but like Banda and Adriana and Julie Doyle really seem to have the remit to just go at those center backs and to try and get those fullbacks pinned. And it is a risk, because those fullbacks, Mason, Rodriguez, want to get high up and be the wide outlets to activate Chawinga and Cooper on the wings. So if they can beat you, then all of a sudden you might be on an island back there. And that is sort of kind of what happened with the goal that Chawinga scores eventually. But for a great deal of those first 30, 35 minutes, it was hard for Rodriguez and Mace to play out. That seemed like a very deliberate strategy and a more concerted one than is often the case when they choose to pick their pressing moments. And I guess I just wasn't expecting that, because just how dangerous Kansas City is in open space, but it worked.
Yeah, what I saw right from the jump were a couple things from Orlando that I really loved and that had clearly been coached. Banda, probably in the no later than the second minute, takes a limited angle shot at AD French just to test.
See what's up.
Just to see what's up. And you got the same thing from Adriana moments later, just to sort of test AD French and to rattle. And then I felt like they sat back, and I know that on paper they were playing 4-4-1-1, but this is where describing where formations sort of fail you, because they were doing this sort of shifting swing hybrid back three thing that I thought was brilliant to watch. But they sort of, after this initial foray, I felt like Orlando was like, okay, Kansas City, what do you got? And Kansas City sort of huffed and puffed and really failed to generate anything approaching a decent scoring chance in those first 10 minutes. I think we end up with a Michelle Cooper header. That's it's sort of the moment in those first few minutes. And then Kansas City, as they often do, sort of hit that, pull it back into a more reasonable gear. And that's when Orlando pounced.
Yep.
Like it was almost like you could feel it like 15, 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
That Kansas City sort of hit that wind block, as we've talked about, the in-game rest, the in-game take breaks. And Orlando sort of found that crease, that moment, and then really put Kansas City under a bunch of pressure. But that pressure kind of didn't exist before the 20th or so minute.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought that was utterly brilliant tactical everything from Seb Hines, and also great study. You could tell that, and then I think we'll get to, this is actually probably a good place to get to the blunder in my mind that Seb Hines made, and maybe the only real one, but one all the same. I think he got everything right with sort of this shifting 3-back, 5-back thing. And then with Angelina sort of like dropping in to create clog. And in that clogged space, there wasn't a lot of interplay and a lot of passing. And once you'd sort of exhausted that initial Kansas City burst, it really was just Debinha and Chawinga.
Yeah.
Sort of being the force attacking wise. But then you get to, and it is unfortunate, but I actually thought Carrie Lawrence, as much as a player can have a nice game in 42 minutes before getting sent off, I actually think, bar a moment of madness that is what sends her off, she played Chawinga exactly the way teams are probably going to have to play Chawinga if you choose to man mark or if you choose to ISO.
Yeah, I mean, there's two moments where she falters, one of which is the goal.
Totally.
And then the other is dragging her down to get sent off a couple of minutes later. But otherwise, yes, I mean, she stuck to her like glue. And Chawinga is just so smart and so talented that she knew how to use that physical battle to her advantage in 3 key moments to get Lawrence 2 cards and to eventually break free and do what Chawinga does and eventually get to the goal. But you're right. I think that Lawrence having that sort of tasked role, I think one of the things that we also have to bear in mind in terms of like, was this the return of US Andonovski, is that they're down. Vanessa DiBernardo was not on the field, and Bia Zanerato was not on the field. And that's sort of and like when you have that front 5 all cooking, or even if you don't have DiBernardo, but at least you have Bia to cover central areas and come deep, like that's when KC looks at their most terrifying, because there is just no place you can hide from that front 4 or front 5 when DiBernardo is there. When it's just Chawinga and it's just Cooper and Debinha sort of in behind them and potentially running past, it's a little bit easier to manage. And I think that's where maybe the slowness of decision making or the inability to sort of find creases and seams on a consistent level for Chawinga to latch onto, that's, I think, a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. And I think that it would be fair to say Michelle Cooper, who is having a nice season, is no substitute for what Bia and DiBernardo have been producing and what they've been able to do in terms of creation, particularly in terms of winning the middle of the park.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's not even necessarily that like she doesn't offer the same level of talent. It's just that she has a different job.
Totally.
And the job that Bia fills can't really be filled.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And ultimately, in the 11-on-11 portion of this game, it did feel like Orlando had sort of dictated where the play was going to exist, and that the center of the park was going to be effectively Orlando's and not an effective place to play through. And that is, Vlatko deserves credit because it is hard to be without two such crucial pieces on which you have built the foundation of a very good team. That said, I think that the issue I saw once, like flipping back to Orlando, once we saw Carrie Lawrence pick up that initial yellow, that the man marking was essentially the responsibility still, was just begging for a second
yellow.
A second yellow to come.
To the point where, I mean, 2 minutes before it happened, JP Dellacamera actually says on the broadcast, like, Chawinga is going to try and draw a second yellow out of Carrie Lawrence.
Oh my God.
Literally 2 minutes before it happened.
This is the perfect time to sort of like hop over and talk about both of the goals.
Yeah.
Because the first goal is created from a Carrie Lawrence one, although it might have been a foul, turnover off Chawinga.
Right.
And turns into effectively a quick sequence of 3 passes or 4 passes, 3 passes, a shot that's deflected horribly into Banda's path, and a really expert finish from a very deadly player. But that the outlet to Chawinga had become so predictable that there was a body on every single time.
That's right.
That body on, it reminded me a lot of basketball when you sort of key on the primary scoring option, and you sort of had a shutdown defender who was in foul trouble and getting away with some, but the lingering problem of foul trouble was going to be there no matter what. And so the first goal, which Orlando I think can count themselves pretty lucky because it is a horrific deflection off ball right into Banda's path. And frankly, it's a terrible shot. It's like a scuffed, I don't even know if, I don't know if Adriana would want to call that a shot. I don't know what she'd like that defined as.
I mean, I don't know. You mean Adriana's shot you're talking about?
Yeah. The one that sort of leads to Banda's goal is like, I don't know what you want to call that.
It doesn't, it's FB Ref calculates the chance at a 0.03 xg, and they don't even register a post shot, obviously, because it makes the deflection. So
to those people out there who are like, just put it on goal, not from that position a lot of the time, and not a good idea. But sometimes very unfortunate things happen on very terrible shots.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so to a certain extent, yes, it's luck, but also, I mean, Banda's Banda. Like, Banda finishing the lucky chance is no accident, and there are not a lot of strikers in this league who would be able to make the motion necessary to latch onto that deflection and make sure that it finds net,
By the way, I am not calling this goal luck. I am just saying that it was a good defensive sequence that turned into a fast attack that had one horrific touch that we can't count as a pass, but that effectively worked like a pass.
Right.
And then a true poacher's finish. And we saw in this game, and I'm sure we'll go into it at length later, just like all the ways in which Barbra Banda can kill you. And this was just one of the ways Barbra Banda killed.
She could have had 3 goals. She could have had a hat trick.
She could have. I mean, it's actually also like all the creation stuff that she could have done. I mean, she just kind of she was a total menace.
Yeah.
But what I loved about this is because instead of moving away from using Chawinga as an outlet, what we get 2 minutes later is the exact same plan of action from Kansas City.
Only this time it works.
Only this time, Chawinga's like, nah, I have had enough of this ankle biter clipping at my heels. I'm going full Maradona on this moment.
Just throws Lawrence to the ground, more or less.
Just throws Lawrence off and goes full Maradona.
Yeah.
Takes the ball in possession 60 yards from goal with her back to goal, beats 1, 2, 3, 4, and then slots across the face of goal. For me, it's probably the best individual goal I've seen this season. Yeah. It's really, really up there. And once Lawrence is beaten, nobody on Orlando really has a plan of action for how to stop Chawinga. They're like, maybe if we just sort of keep guiding her, we've been beat for pace.
Yeah.
And Chawinga just has a pure run of it and slots home. Again, it's another one of those that's not the byproduct of like brilliant build-up, but the byproduct of good execution of game plan. The execution of game plan was get the ball to Temwa, let her do her thing.
Yeah. Well, and also,
score.
It's what's so interesting about that run is that like there were plenty of moments where, as you say, get the ball to Temwa and let her do her thing. Like Orlando did have it covered. They would get 2 help defenders to come pull over almost instantaneously the moment the ball wasn't even yet at her feet, but was like drafting into her feet.
Totally.
And she didn't have a lot of space to operate in. And I think that the goal, it represents much more Chawinga's skill and less the incompetence, quote unquote, of Orlando's defense in that moment. The ways in which she accelerates, decelerates, changes direction multiple times, like, and to the point where like FB Ref has the goal listed as a 0.06 XG chance. ASA, I didn't pull the exact XG figure that ASA put that goal at, but I do know that it's higher than 0.06.
Yeah, and I think I want to give credit here as well. Again, I agree with you. I am not saying Orlando does poorly, though I'm sure in the video session, this is one that everyone will groan at, and there will be some unfun conversation had. I think Orlando does as well as anyone can do when dealing with an on-running Temwa Chawinga with the ball at your feet. We're talking about a legitimate MVP in this league, and the other person who, in this 2-person runaway race at this point, is on the other side of the field. But Chawinga sort of, in some ways, this is my favorite of her performances in this league. Not because it was the most dominant, but because it displayed so many things that she does well and showed that when there weren't other pieces around, she can still beat, effectively cause huge problems.
If there's an Orlando defender that could be said to be at fault at all in that goal, it's probably Anna Morehouse for not even laying a glove to the ball because she was very close to it.
But what I think Chawinga does, and she did it again later in the game, and it's such an effective tactic. And I can't wait for us to have a goalkeeper on to talk about this. But she fires with basically no backlift.
Yeah.
And catches Morehouse flat-footed. Mm-hmm. So the shot, which doesn't have a ton of pace on it, is just as effective because the keeper's timing is off. And Chawinga is so good at that. She has a shot with the outside of her right foot that Morehouse does make an extraordinary save on. That was another one of those zero backlift. It's almost like watching a pitcher with a weird delivery screw with a batter. Like it's giving Johnny Cueto or Zach Greinke. It's messing with the timing, and Chawinga is so good at variation on when she's going to shoot.
Right.
Like her hesitation, and you see this with the best strikers, but her hesitation to go left, instead of like taking the time to wind up and crank it into the corner, she just tries to get a foot on it, just a peg on it as fast as possible. Yeah. And it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And it Morehouse is just like, oh, I was waiting for the shot like a third of a second later.
Right.
Shit.
Yeah. So I'm just watching the highlight again. Just to see. Yeah, dude, like
it's so incredible. I mean, like it's so incredible. Actually, it is Maradona.
I actually think the ball actually does go under Morehouse's hand. That's how close Morehouse was to it.
And Morehouse had a great game. Yeah. That needs to be stated.
Morehouse had, that save on Chawinga in first half stoppage time was amazing.
Yeah,
to push it wide of the post.
That's the outside of the foot save.
Right.
Morehouse had a very good game. This is just two people at a very high level, and one of them won this moment.
That's right.
But Chawinga like almost doesn't need to get her hips around just to snap. I realized when I was making notes before going on today that like I was going to end up using different sports references to describe what Temwa Chawinga does well because we don't see it as often in soccer. This is the version of a snapshot in hockey, like with no backlift whatsoever, not a wrister, just something that you flick really quickly.
Yep.
And having that in your arsenal as a striker, Chawinga just demonstrated why it's so valuable. Why, in combination with her pace, her many different approaches to shooting are going to just continue rewarding Kansas City.
Yeah.
That said, let's get to the red card.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts initially? Was that a bang-on red card for you?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a second yellow. Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's also, I think you have to remember the legitimately subjective side of refereeing, which is that it was a culmination of a lot of physical activity between Lawrence and Chawinga. You know, Lawrence was already on a yellow card, and they had been scrapping back and forth. There were fouls that probably should have been called that weren't. Like, it had to, and not only that, but like throughout the entire first half, the game was quite chippy. Claire Lavage went on a very hard tackle on Marta, and Marta like blew a gasket. And Marta, for all of her enthusiasm and her energy, she doesn't get mad very often. So, I mean, the occasion of the moment is obviously a real thing, but like the game had been pretty physical up to then. Marta was the recipient of a lot of hits, and Lavage was the heaviest of them all. And so I think that was a signal that the ref needed to maybe try and get the game a little bit under control. And Lawrence just picked the wrong time to try and keep Chawinga contained. And again, like I said, I think Chawinga was playing into it. Not to say that she was flopping or play acting, but like she knew how to like maneuver her body to draw the maximum amount of contact to get a call. And it was inevitable, I think. You know, again, like Della Camera calling it just a couple of minutes before it actually happened shows you the consistent level of this kind of physicality throughout those first 42 minutes. So I have no qualm with Lawrence being sent off. But of course, it did change the entire tenor of the game. And what we're going to talk about with regard to the second half is going to be a very different kind of tactical conversation. But yeah, I think it was inevitable, and it certainly helps fuel like what this rivalry is going to be, which we'll talk about a little bit more at the end of the episode. But the seeds are being sown here.
You said earlier that you thought this was possibly the best played game. And I think if your aesthetic is 1990s Serie A, this probably was the best played game in the league this season.
It's my aesthetic is not that, but that's an interesting point.
I just mean that, like, if that were your aesthetic, this was there were elements of this game that were really for that kind of purist, which is probably more my aesthetic at times than yours. But like, there was so much chippiness going around. And again, I think it's one of those that maybe Hines had sort of thought, once we get into the locker room, I'll have a talk with Carrie and we'll figure it out and we'll make an adjustment there. But the compounded problem of giving up, of sort of missing the first tackle on what became Chawinga's leveler, I think after a stunningly difficult half of marking this woman, the sum total of that effect had gotten to Carrie Lawrence, and I think she just like lost her mind for a split second.
I think that's probably true.
Not only does she fail to make a tackle in the first iteration of this like moment, but Chawinga is off again with the ball, and Lawrence doesn't consider, or if she does consider, makes a poor decision about the threat level that Chawinga was presenting. But I think Chawinga was so in her head at that point that despite the fact Chawinga was dribbling away from goal and away from threat and with no support around her, Lawrence goes in to make this just a clear yellow card tackle. It is hard. It was brutal.
Yeah, and Hines is
stupid.
I think you're right. Like Hines' miscalculation was thinking that they could ride it out for just 5 more minutes and get into the locker room. Like, if he had been a little bit more proactive and tried to get a signal out to the field to like change the marking assignments and like tell Lawrence, like, either we're sit a little bit further back, but we're going to play a little bit more compact to try and help you out so that you don't have to be glued onto her, then maybe that moment is avoided. But I can also understand why Hines didn't think he had to do that immediately after the goal was scored, because you're so close to halftime. It's a real knife's edge of like speed of decision making that, of course, can fuck you, and it did fuck Orlando in this instance. That's a tough 3 minutes to make that calculation, and they got screwed.
Moreover, there just is a psychological effect to being subbed off in the first half.
Think so?
And it would have taken a sub, I think, to properly adjust for Chawinga. I don't think that there was like a rotation that was necessarily like clean or obvious at this point. I think it requires somebody coming on the field with like new tactics and a conversation. And nobody on Orlando had played poorly, and so the idea of taking someone off to make a tactical adjustment
that maybe trying to like switch the tactics up just for those last 5 minutes, maybe it just wouldn't have worked anyway. So yeah, it's you're between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, and that said, I think it is a blessing, not that the sending off is a blessing in disguise, but getting Raffaele on is a blessing in disguise.
Hugely. Yeah, and it's and I think that Raffaele is a much more, not that Carrie Lawrence isn't necessarily a disciplined center back, it's just that Carrie Lawrence has less experience. And Raffaele has been in this game for over a decade. She knows what she's doing. So if Raffaele had been fit enough to play full 90, maybe that dynamic between Chawinga and Raffaele would have been very different. Don't know. We'll never know.
Is this now the time where we move on to the Barbra Banda appreciation portion of this podcast, in addition to the goal that she scored? Because if you're going to play down a person, Banda is a cheat code.
Banda is an absolute cheat code because it's a combination of things, right? So this second half, as you said at the top of the show, this is a half that coaches should study with regard to like how you play with 10 players. And yes, Banda helps you do a lot of those things, but also the way that Hines has drilled this team defensively for now a year and a half allows for Banda to remain that cheat code, because you can put eight behind the ball rather than 9, but because it is so incredibly compact and so well organized and moves in tandem like a school of fish, side to side, up and down, that you don't have to worry about having that one extra body behind the ball to keep space closed off. And then because Banda is freed of that responsibility, Banda can go and do what she does in the 80th minute and almost get you a third goal. Also helps to create the penalty chance. Like, that is not available to most teams, but also the level of defensive organization with only 9 outfield players on the field isn't available to most teams, I don't think.
Yeah, she even had like an extraordinarily dangerous moment in like the 51st minute, and it resulted in a blocked shot. Banda was like sideline to sideline, covering a huge amount of the pitch.
Yeah.
Presenting attacking outlets. And if you take a look at the pass chart into the final third, I think Orlando doesn't play a cross-channel ball or a diagonal. Almost everything was a vertical ball into the final third.
Yeah, and they were relying on Banda to be the one to create offense into the box. Like they had 2 passes go into the box the entire game. One was a throw in, one was a cross. One was a corner kick. All of the activity of moving the ball into the box came from Adriana and Banda playing off the dribble. Now, once they were in the box, they were, extremely active, but like to actually like move it into the 18-yard area, there was no interest, even before going down a player. So it was the Banda show. And like when she, I think it was the 80th minute chance where Banda receives a long ball out by the touchline. It looks like it's going out. She keeps it in. Her marker is immediately sucked onto her and like puts a hand on her marker's back and almost like jumps both over and around her and then latches onto the ball.
Yeah, no, it's nuts.
There's like very few people can do that.
On a hot summer day, it is unbelievable the runs that Barbra Banda was still making.
Yeah.
In the 80th minute.
Yeah.
She was providing outlet, often on opposite flanks, minutes apart from each other, for Orlando to pass the ball into the attacking third.
Yeah. And again, like if you look at the full 90-minute field control visualization from at NWSL Stat, our friend Sebastian Bush on Twitter, like it's the one area where Orlando has ball control is right in front of their own goal. So the idea that Banda was able to continually find space both vertically and laterally to be an outlet is an extraordinary thing. And again, when down a player, it's usually not possible.
When we think about like these pivotal moments inside the game, before we get to the penalty, which I'm looking forward to discussing.
And I should correct myself. Banda really wasn't involved in that. That was all Adriana Franch smacking Adriana in the face.
No. But Banda is part of the build-up to the knockdown of Adriana. I mean, Banda had a hand in absolutely everything that Orlando did in attack. But before we get there, Chawinga has a pretty huge chance.
In the 55th?
In the 55th.
Yeah, that crazy rebound that bounces around in the box. Debinha tries to shoot, then Cooper ends up finally shooting out from 30 yards.
It's the one I'm sure if we had Temwa Chawinga on, she would want back as a chance.
Right. And the reason it looks like a low XG chance is just because Morehouse comes out to challenge for the ball and she can't just get a clean shot off. But the buildup and the run that leads up to that shot is pretty remarkable.
This is where I want to hammer down on Vlatko again. Chawinga was alone. She was on an island with only Debinha coming in support as a secondary run, and they were up a man.
Yeah.
I know Chawinga is fast, but that there were no sort of second and third wave attackers coming in, and that sort of Chawinga doesn't have an alternative besides a not particularly high XG chance there, and then doesn't hit it that well, and Morehouse does pretty brilliantly in that moment. I actually think was sort of indicative of Kansas City at 1-1 not pushing hard enough to try to get a winner for my taste.
I can hear that. Yeah, and I think the player that kind of can serve as a symbol for that is Claire Lavage, who played fairly deep as a sort of hybrid number 8, number 10 in possession, and he was looking for, I think Andonovski was looking for a spare creative player to add numbers, and that's why he wanted to push her down and allowed Debinha to run past and join the forward line. And I think that was a legitimate strategy until the 42nd minute, when all of a sudden you're up a player and you could really go at them. So why not use Lavage for what she's really, really good at, which is menacing back lines? So why not push her up and create a band of 4? Especially because you're missing DiBernardo and Bia as those extra attacking players. That would have made a lot of sense going into the second half. He didn't do that, and not only that, he pulled Lavage.
I think Vlatko's subs, again, it's a thin bench, but I think Vlatko's subs didn't do him any favors in this game.
You're going to have her be on the field for 15 normal time minutes plus first half stoppage time after the second yellow?
Yeah, no.
What? For Bailey, and you put Bailey Feist on? That's not like for like, and that's not telling your home fans, your sellout crowd on the biggest game of your season, that you are going for it.
Well, let's put a pin in that because I want to get to how important this game was when we get to the end. That 56th minute chance, that sequence, was indicative of a team that just up a player just wasn't pushing hard enough for me.
Sure.
And this is the downside of taking these breaks inside games. I felt like Kansas City was we're just going to wear them down. We're just going to play this 1-1 and wear them down. And eventually the barrage will come, and we'll do it when they're really tired.
Which, to be fair, almost worked, at least to get a 2-2 draw right at the end. I mean, again, FB Ref puts Ellie Wheeler's shot at 0.13 XG, and that's not correct. ASA's got it at 0.44. StatsBomb has it at 0.32. It's quite clearly a better chance than 0.13. I think FB Ref is not coding it as winning a ball off a turnover, whereas ASA and StatsBomb are, because the ball comes off of the defender first before Wheeler pounces. So it's a much better chance than I think a 0.13. And it's a result of 5 to 6 minutes of pretty sustained pressure when Orlando is beginning to tire and wear it down. But the problem is
they've got a lead.
They've got a lead, and so therefore the best you could hope for is a 2-2 draw, unless you could create one more chance that finds net as well. But it's a lot to ask to just say we'll figure it out at the end of the game.
All right, what did you think of? Was this a penalty for you? Yeah, me too. I am really sick and tired of goalkeepers getting away with this shit.
I don't think there's any debate about that. No. I mean, Adriana, there was no ball being played. when French went into Adriana's face.
As a former striker, nothing sucks more than getting two fists right in your face a second after a chance and then hearing nothing, hearing no whistle, just crumbling over. This was not the first time AD French had been late to a ball this game. And this one, because she has a moment in the 25th where she's a little where she's slow off the line. But AD French, as we had discussed last season a lot, was sort of going through a horror show. She is not going through that same horror show right now, but she is still among the worst, if not the worst, performing keeper in the league right now.
From a shot-stopping point of view, yes. Now, it does need to be caveated with the note that this is a much... Well, it's a small sample, and also it's a much tighter distribution of shot-stopping production this year than it was last year. Granted, Ann-Katrin Berger is sort of setting she's lapping the field, but aside from her, everybody else is pretty tightly formed. Like right now, if you average ASA, FBref, and Y-Scouts shot-stopping models together by goals allowed divided by post-shot XG, whereas a 1.0 value means you are saving the goals that you should be saving, and you are conceding the goals that you should be conceding. So number lower than that means you're good. You're saving more shots than you're expected to. Anything above that means you're saving fewer. So Adriana Franch is at 1.05 goals per post shot XG faced. That's worst among everyday keepers, but it's 1.05. It's not like 1.2 or 1.25.
No, it's below average. It's below average, but it's not crazy. That's said, right. The problem here is that you need to be doing a
continuation of a pattern.
Yeah, it's a continuation of a pattern that has been abundantly clear for a while now. And the penalty is given away because of a slow reaction time and not a shot issue. And I feel like we have seen wobbles from AD Franch that were like knowable, fixable things and that have sort of been glossed over by Kansas City's excellent attack and performances this year.
That's right.
That I think were laid bare in the highest stakes game of the season once again. And like in my notes, I just have Franch lucky not to give away a pen. Oh, wait, it's a pen. And because I think there's just no need for her to follow through, but she's late and she's overcompensating for being late to that ball, in my mind.
I'm looking forward to talking to an actual former goalkeeper because I'm just curious to hear their perspective on to what level of indignity it is to also have a Panenka scored on you.
Oh my God. Yeah, again, this game was just slowly I'm coming around on it. It was pulling out all the classics. I got my goal of the century Maradona Chawinga goal, and then I got my Panenka penalty from Marta, which was class as hell. And I know that people online were giving Marta crap for not being sportsmanlike. To them, I say, go yourself. Go, sports are entertainment on some level, and that was entertaining as hell. And if you drop a Panenka in the biggest game of the season and you've been roughed up before, rub it in and let it be fine.
Yeah.
You're the GOAT.
Scream in the opposing fans' faces, grab the badge, the whole bit.
Yeah, no, just like,
who cares?
I want to see that kind of passion, and I want to see that kind of guile, and I want to see that kind of sense of humor on the field all the time.
Yeah.
Totally. I thought Marta, it's a brilliant Panenka. And Orlando, after it, is feeling pretty great. We have our cheat code Barbra Banda, and now we're just going to drop back into one of the most staunch defensive sets I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, they played a 5-3-1, basically just above their own box and in their own box for 40 minutes. And there's one great moment in the 80th where Banda is able to get free and almost make it 3-1, which is, again, how impressive is it that you can be so well drilled and have such a talented striker that when you're down a player and you're already up a goal on the road, where most coaches would be like, yeah, let's just shut up shop here, you're still going for it. It's a real in-your-bag kind of moment.
You had, from that moment on, I'm just going to describe the outcomes of all of the shots that were taken by Kansas City. saved from 27, off target from 35, blocked from 14, blocked from 29, blocked from 27, off target from 32,
off target from 18,
off target from 14, but it's a header, saved from 14, it's a header, saved, and this is the Ellis Wheeler chance that is incredible.
Yeah.
Saved.
Yeah. The one opportunity they got.
They got one look, and Morehouse shut it down, followed by off-target header, off-target 27-yarder, off-target header from 16.
Yeah.
These
are not good chances. Except for Ellie Wheeler. These are not good chances. When you are up a player and you have the kind of attack that Kansas City has.
This was a masterclass in killing every single window or angle toward a productive shot, and in dispiriting the team that is trying to break the bus you've parked.
Yeah. In their house, in front of their fans who have come to believe, rightfully so, that they have the best game day atmosphere in the whole league.
It was great. It was pretty electric. But Orlando just... And I wonder if they wouldn't have been more vulnerable at even strength. But I think that there was something to just the bunker and Banda of it all that was like perfect for what this game, for the last, 30 something, because we had ungodly amounts of extra time again, 30 or something minutes from the Marta penalty on.
Yeah.
What did you see from Kansas City? Do you feel like it was just like absence of quality players to break down? Because what I saw was a really frustrated Debinha and not a lot of ability to sort of dynamically break down a bus. Yeah,
again, I think the Debinha isn't the player who is there to provide Chawinga specifically service. So without Bia being the central option and with Michelle Cooper having a very muted game on the right, Chawinga didn't have a lot of availability to receive to feet once she was in the final third. And as the game continued on and Orlando just got more and more and more compact, and they are the best team in the league at doing this, with all respect to Chicago, like they needed the weapons that were not there. Like if DiBernardo is there, then she and Debinha can create combinations and free up some seams and allow Chawinga to run off the line. If Bia is there, Bia can both hold up the ball and also do some take-on work while Chawinga makes her run and gets service that way. Both of those players being there gives Cooper less attention paid to her, so she can actually do some take-on work and drive end line and create, which is what is making her season so good this year. But without Bia and DiBernardo, your options just shrink, and then you end up sort of having an imbalance of creative versatility among your forward line. So, and then again, when you are playing Orlando specifically, that is going to be the toughest team to be in that situation against. Because, I think if there's any reason why I'm maybe a little bit more down on Chicago than other people, it's because everything that Chicago does well is done better by an actually great team, and that's Orlando.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Lord Donaldson would have enjoyed watching this Orlando performance, and, he can show the Red Stars this and say, this is what we should be doing.
This is our dream.
But, Seb Hines just has an extra year on him right now in terms of the development track of this team.
And working with the players, too.
Yeah. I want to give Seb Hines, for the sort of the Carrie Lawrence, whatever. I want to give Seb Hines a ton of credit here. I felt like the Raffaele sub was excellent. I felt like getting Summer Yates off was excellent.
Yeah, that's the key one.
I felt like the Haley McCutcheon for Summer Yates sub was the key one for me.
Yeah.
And
again, what are all these players? What are all their profiles? They live in the middle of the park and they don't care about having the ball.
Yeah.
And they've all, Raffaele slightly accepted because she came in late last year. McCutcheon and Carrie Abello and Emily Sams have been every single week working on this with Hines for a year and a half or longer if they were on the team in 2022. They are an extremely well-oiled machine. When you talk about how the secret to the Golden State Warriors' success was actually Andre Iguodala, this is sort of what that looks like in this context. Like, you have Barbra, Banda, and Adriana to take all the attention, but it's the role players who are just being drilled in how to like not give up space that's making this thing sing.
And you just see Kansas City. I mean, 6% of their box entry passes came from the center of the park.
Right.
They were being funneled.
Yep.
Effectively funneled.
Yep.
At all times. And it only became more exaggerated once these subs had come on.
Yeah.
I felt like Orlando, as funny as that field control map is, what is more important is where Orlando controlled in its shell than the rest of the field where Kansas City dominated. Because the one part of the field that Kansas City needed to penetrate was unpenetratable.
That's right. Yeah. That purple circle, it's not like it's spreading the entire width of the box below the penalty yard spot or anything, or just in the 6-yard box. Like, it is dead center from basically goal mouth to 18-yard line.
And we just described it with shots. Other than the Ellis Wheeler chance, there is nothing, and that's from 10. There is nothing closer.
Yep.
I felt like every single time I was watching like excellent zonal shifting and funneling, dictating where Kansas City would play the ball in Kansas City. And again, this is sort of where I sort of moan and Vlatko and whatever. Vlatko's having a spectacular season. He's done brilliantly with this Kansas City team. It is not a big criticism to say that a guy who was not a terrible coach of the national team went through a 33-minute period against the other best team in this league, and the team didn't find that opening.
Yep.
But it was eye-opening to see Kansas City not able to find a goal.
It is
not able to attack.
It's the cliche of the unstoppable force meeting the unmovable object, and the unmovable object won. I mean, there's so many points in this game that had they broken a different way, Kansas City would have walked away with it. Like, if the long ball to Ellie Wheeler in the 93rd is a pretty searching, hopeful ball. It's not necessarily born out of a lot of like high quality open play, but it takes a slightly different bounce after deflecting off the defender. Maybe Wheeler has a better angle against Morehouse and she scores. And if you combine that with, say, Franch being a split second earlier on challenging the ball with Adriana in the 60th minute, that maybe doesn't become a penalty. And then all of a sudden, Kansas City's winning 2-1. I mean, that's just how close in quality these teams are, that just a couple of little rubs of the green go in one way. It reminds me of that famous 2019 game between Manchester City men and Liverpool men, which essentially decided the title that year. And that came down to like a millimeter of a ball not crossing a goal line, Otherwise, it was incredibly attritional.
I remember.
Yeah. But that's sort of what we're seeing. But that's basically what we're seeing here. Perhaps not as extreme as that, but like just these little moments that ended up deciding the result.
No, I mean, the similarities extend. Obviously, Temwa Chawinga is a perfect hybrid of Mo Salah and Sadio Mane. So, like, I'm with you on this. No, I think that the margins were so fine in this game. It absolutely could have broke either direction. I think we learned that these two teams are the best two teams.
Yeah.
I don't think, Kansas City generated enough non-penalty XG to, have warranted another goal. They didn't get another goal. That's not how this works. It is not a 1-to-1 thing.
Yeah.
But, they gave up a bad penalty. They gave up a bad shot that deflected into the path of a lethal striker. And that was enough for Orlando to have and to hold.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great game.
I really love this game.
We're about to go into a very dark period. If you're fiending for more NWSL, you got a little wait.
Yep. 7 weeks to be exact.
Obviously, the North America Leagues Cup, where 5 groups but only 4 teams advance, whatever is coming up. But we have...
Whatever it's worth.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth. But we have a little break, and this was like a tremendous send-off. Almost too good to be scripted for this. The scheduling gods really got this one right. But they knew things that no one could have known about these two teams.
And as we said, this is fast on its way to becoming a rivalry now. Like the ways in which the flow of the game unfolded, the final scoreline, the way that Marta went absolutely ballistic on Kansas City fans at final whistle, which is clearly the result of a lot of pent-up tension that the previous 105 minutes had created, to Michelle Cooper on Instagram saying, like, we know what they said when the cameras were off. We will never forget. Like, when this return fixture comes to Orlando in September, it's going to be fucking tasty.
Obviously, if you were scripting this, the brilliant thing here is the possibility, and I think possibly the likeliest outcome, of Orlando winning the Shield, going in first, Kansas City going in second, not facing each other until the final, where Orlando theoretically should be the advantage team,
but
and having
being
to come
played
back
in Kansas City, yeah,
with Kansas City,
that's right,
your second place team hosting the final against your Shield winner. I think that I am all about that possibility. I think it is the likeliest, which still makes it quite unlikely, of outcomes at this point. But boy, that would be delightful.
We have not had a Shield winner play a 2 seed in the final yet under this new playoff format that started in 2022. And there's maybe no more deserving a year for that to happen than this year.
Orlando is about to add Grace Chanda.
Mm-hmm.
It seems really unfair.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and she and Banda can get a little tune-up at the Olympics. Together.
Yeah, no, just
playing against some Kansas City players.
That's absolutely right. We got lucky with this final fixture. Any other stuff grab your attention from over the weekend?
No. Gotham pantsed Angel City. I was there. It was as bad as it seemed. A lot of other games were again beset by sun and heat and humidity, and were not all that good. And that's a bummer. It's been, I would count that as the fourth straight match week where we've had to deal with that issue, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. It's really unfortunate.
It was smoldering in Portland. I enjoyed that San Diego went back from their more attacking ways.
Mm-hmm.
They went back to Stony Ball.
Yep.
Except it didn't work out at all.
Nope.
So, given what's been happening here, that was just a nice little moment.
Yeah. Louisville looked terrible. By the way, all of our best wishes to Bev Yanez and her family. It was announced, obviously, that she had miscarried her child, and she is going to be taking some time to deal with all of that and process that. And I must say, I tip my hat to her to talking about it in public, because this is not an issue that is often discussed in public for lots of different reasons. So, full credit to her, and I hope that she's doing okay.
It's really incredible that she came out and was so open with it. One of the least discussed things in our culture, miscarriages. So everything is okay.
And as for us, we're going to be saying goodbye to the NWSL for the next 7 weeks and saying hello to U.S. women's national team coverage and Olympics coverage more broadly. So get buckled up for that.
All of my previously stated reservations remain.
Yep.
Until they don't remain.
Yep. Well, Bill will be doing some deep dives previewing both the U.S. and their Olympics group in the coming weeks. But we will be back and talking to you on Thursday for our bonus episode.
Yeah. Talk soon.
Bye.